When I grow up, I want to be like Giovanni Marsico. I want to produce great, big, huge events and bring together amazing and inspiring people that impact the lives of millions. Giovanni, welcome to She Talks Business.
Wow, what an intro. Thank you so much.
It's so good to have you here. And, one of my questions later on is about your events and, the risk involved in producing large events, because I have produced smaller scale, like 400 people events, and I know it's involved. So I really mean it when I say you have a talent, a gift, a skill for producing outstanding events. Archangel is one of the best productions I've ever seen, probably outside of Cirque du Soleil. So, uh, you do an
That means a
outstanding
lot
job.
because they are my inspiration. So thank you.
Yeah, they're fantastic. Another fantastic Canadian entrepreneur.
Wow.
All right. So I have a lot of questions for you. And my first question is, where did your mission to impact millions come from? Because once upon a time, you were in real estate. So what happened? Where did that mission come from? How long did you hear that calling before you decided to do something?
I I think it was always there. So I'll give you a little origin. I worked the last job I ever had was the best job I ever had. It was running the marketing at a company called Strategic Coach, led by Dan Sullivan. And I left there in 2005, which was the year my son was born, because I thought if I don't go fully into entrepreneurship now, I will always have an excuse. So at the time I was doing marketing, coaching, and consulting. And in my previous life, when I was 16 years old, I started producing dance parties for teenagers. So I've been doing events now for 30 years. I've had over a quarter million people attend my events over those 30 years. And the event production experience design was always in my genetics. Um, the mission impact component started coming to me in the mid 2000s when I was on my own. And I actually came up with the Archangel idea in 2009. At the same time, one of my clients in my coaching business was in the real estate space, and I uh, blew up their business, and it was very successful. So they said, "Why don't you partner with me, do all my marketing for my real estate business, uh, and we'll split things?" And at the time, I needed to pay bills. Like a lot of us were in that position of, well, how do I make sure I have a roof over my head, kind of thing, for my son. But I actually had the Archangel idea at the time, which was I wanted to create this um, school for entrepreneurs to learn how to be successful, and for some of them provide funding, and then there's a whole philanthropic arm where we do amazing things in the world together to support charities or um, help a lot of people. And I think where it came from was that I wish it was what I wish I had when I was younger, because I
Mm.
didn't really have mentorship guidance. I didn't have financial backing in any way. So there's a lot of struggle to figure things out the hard way. And I believe a lot of us create our ideas for a business based on helping other people avoid the pain we've been through. So that's where it all kind of started. And then I've been a community builder for my whole life. Like my very first event when I was 17 years old, I had 1,000 people, which is insanity. And I love bringing people together. So as I was building up the real estate business, I started investing in personal development and in joining mastermind groups and going to conferences. And I kept thinking, these are all great, but there's always something missing, which is people like me. So I started Archangel as a side project during my real estate days in 2014 to create events for people like me, to build community of people who want to do really well and do good at the same time and not have to choose one or the other. So
So
that's
when you
where it
say
all
people
started.
like me, what do you mean by that? Is it just people that want to do well, or is there something more specific?
It's so back in the 2012, 2013 era, a lot of the conversation, so I was in rooms with very successful people, but a lot of the conversation was, how do we just make more money? And in my real estate business, it was just make me more money, please. It was a lot of investing clients. And that never really aligned with me. But then there was another group of people that were labeled themselves as social entrepreneurs that I was in these communities, and their whole thing was we just want to we have a mission, we want to do good in the world, and to the point where it was like money's a bad thing. We don't care about money. We just want to do good. It was like they weren't nonprofits. They were somehow a for-profit business, but they didn't really care about the profit. And people like me is how do we impact 1 million people and make millions of dollars? Because we need that money to make the change we want to make.
Right.
And I felt like I was this weird Venn diagram of both groups that I was in. So I thought there must be more people like me who have the deep desire to transform the lives of other people and be financially successful.
Hmm. Yeah, I totally relate. I totally relate. I never want to make money just to make money. I love making money,
Right.
but I love making money and knowing that I'm making a difference.
Right.
You know, to me, they go hand in hand. If you're making money and you're not creating a better experience for somebody else on the other side, then what's the point of making money? Because at the end of the day, your legacy is you were rich. I would rather be remembered for the impact that I've had in people's lives than the amount of money in my bank account.
Exactly.
Don't get me wrong, I want there to be money in my bank account too, but okay. My second question is, how have you built such a strong network around you? Because I know you worked at Strategic Coach. I'm in Strategic Coach. I'm in their 10X program. I've met some really cool people through Strategic Coach, but I've noticed that you have a lot of, I'm going to call them high profile friends. And so I think these are my assumptions. I do not know this for certain, but my assumptions are a lot of the people that speak on your stages are people that you know from networking, people that you have relationships with, because I see how they talk about you when they come on stage. And so while I'm sure you are paying some people to speak, I'm sure there are some people that are like, don't be crazy. I don't want your money. I'm your friend. I'm going to come speak at your event. So tell me how you've built such an impressive network of professionals who have become colleagues, friends, and supporters.
I uh, am very intentional with protecting a relationship and deepening um, connection with people. Part of that is understanding what someone's path is on their own journey and then how I could be useful on that path for them. And not just in business relationships, but in everything we do, like friendships, even where there's never a thing about money. It's not even a business transaction. It's just, what do you need? How can I help you? Um, and it's again, it's part of my MO to just be useful for people, whether it leads to something or not. And it always leads to things. You can't ever track it. Like I don't know if you can track return on relationship as you can return on investment, but there's always a return. So, as a specific example, I've made a new friend recently who's someone like me who produces really big events, and he's newer in our world, in different category. But I went to his event; it was awesome. Now I'm connecting him with amazing suppliers. I'm connecting him with potential speakers, and there's nothing I get out of this other than deepening a friendship. But maybe down the line, something happens where he has a connection for me, and it's an instant yes if I ask for something because I've been so useful. So I think part of it is being useful and valuable without asking for anything in return, without expecting anything in return. And there's this beautiful karmic thing that happens where there's always magic in the future if you invest in the present.
So it sounds to me like you put emotional deposits into relationships without expecting anything in return. And you just believe that there will be something that comes back to you in return in some way, shape, or form. Not necessarily, you're not keeping score, but
Right.
by investing in the relationships with people and being useful and doing good things and showing up and giving first and sharing always, at some point it comes back to you in some way.
Yeah, and that's it's very challenging to try to track it, and I don't keep score on purpose. But part of it, I think, is my own energy of what I put out in being that kind of giver because it surrounds me with other people like me.
Mhm.
who naturally want to do it back to me. And it's a very useful skill to have.
Mhm. Yeah, it is for sure. And it's an unusual skill because most people are giving with some type of expectation.
Yeah.
And then when the expectation doesn't come to fruition, there's disappointment and there's resentment. And if you can give just to give and not because you expect something in return, there's a, I don't know, I think there's a freedom
Right.
in that. I think and I also think that when you give with expectation, it can feel manipulative to the person on the other
Right.
side. So, you talked about investing in masterminds and things like that. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about the first big investment you made in yourself as an entrepreneur and maybe how you continue to invest in yourself today and why you think it's important for entrepreneurs to do that?
The first, in this context, the first biggest was strategic coach, actually. So I was, I believe, the first employee to leave and come back as a client, which was such a big deal for me because when I was working there, I thought, I felt like I was almost cheating, meaning, clients would come in who were very successful. They're paying really good money to learn some awesome wisdom on business, and I was being paid to be there, right? And being an entrepreneurial nerd my whole life, at 5 p.m. when office was shutting down, people were going home for dinner. I'd be in the inventory room reading everything. Like I would stay until 8 p.m. learning because it was like what an education. So
Mhm,
I always felt like um, my way of paying it forward was to use what I learned and come back as a client, like become successful, come back and pay to be there, which I
mhm,
did, which was such an awesome thing for me. And then that was 2011. And then in 2012, I joined Joe Polish's Genius Network, which is another, it was 25,000 US a year um, for that group. And at the time, that felt very scary. It was way bigger than anything I've ever done. But I think it brought me to my next level in terms of my own identity and confidence,
mhm,
surrounding myself with awesome, smart people and building relationships there. And then and then the year after was Mastermind Talks or MMT, Jason Gaynor's group. And just surrounding myself with amazing humans and really smart people.
Talk to me a little bit about what you just said in terms of identity. What do you think happens to people's identity when they decide to step up and invest in themselves on a bigger scale?
I think the investment itself is your first transformation. It's like
My dad says hi.
I I mean I can share from my own story, my own journey that something magical happens. Like a great analogy, maybe not the best analogy, but a great one is like a video game. So I used to play whatever Super Mario Brothers when I was young, and my kids still play it. And there's levels, level one, level two, level three, and I feel like life is like that. Life has these levels, like identity levels, and when you get through a major hurdle or defeat a villain in your game, um, you get to your next level, and investing in yourself beyond your comfort zone, and all of the growth happens outside your comfort zone. So it's like
Mhm,
you reach your next level, whatever that is for you, and it fundamentally changes your identity. There's
mhm.
parts of you that will always be there, but there's parts of you that grow in confidence.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that. I remember when I first started my business, uh, a colleague of mine had invested in working with a online coach, someone that I'm not going to bring their name up, but uh, and they had invested $100,000 a year in working with this individual, and I was like, wow, that is like so brave. I can't imagine investing that much money, and I'm a high school dropout. I never went to college or university, and so I had never invested that amount of money in myself. And I remember looking at that person, and I think they had this like entry level program for 6 months, and it was $25,000. And I kept saying to myself, one day I'm going to do that. One day I'm going to be the kind of person that, invests in a program like that. And I remember the day that I was ready to make the investment. And I was so disappointed because I had a call with this individual and I asked them two key questions at the end of the call. My first question was, if I decide to move forward, when can we start? And my second question was, how do I send you the money? Because you're not going to send $25,000 on a 25,000 US dollars on your credit card. And then I went for a massage. And during my massage, I was thinking about, okay, I'm ready to step into this, like just like you, thinking about my identity. So I made the decision and I sent that person a message on Facebook, which they read. And I said, I'm ready. I'm going to do it. I emailed, your person to find out all the details. And they never responded to me. And I was like, oh, maybe there's a lesson here for me to learn. Maybe I shouldn't be responding to, it was a Friday. Maybe I shouldn't respond to clients on Friday nights and on the weekend. And then a week went by before anybody responded to my email. And when they did respond, by that time I had changed my mind.
Yeah.
I said, I'm not moving forward, because if when I'm asking you how to send you $25,000, it takes you a week to get back to me, what's going to happen once I become a client?
Right.
But I hadn't given up on my desire to change my identity. And so I literally went looking and found someone else and invested in myself at that time. But it really was more about me and less about the person. It was more about me being the kind of person that was willing to make a bet on myself, willing to invest in myself and believe in it. So I love that you said that, because I've never actually thought about my identity that way. But you're right. Your identity changes when you make a decision to do something like that.
It also
Right.
changes based on, and it's not meant to be cliche, but we've heard something similar, based on who you surround yourself with.
Mm-hmm.
And I am very strategic with my environment,
Mm-hmm.
not only for myself, but then, for example, when anyone comes to one of our events, it's the same thing. It's like I'm very specific with who I have there, because transformation happens in the room. Like, and identity shifting happens after the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I have a responsibility for creating these rooms that matter, and rooms that create identity shifts. And it's such an amazing, beautiful thing. So there's the experience of the show that I create, and the agenda of the event kind of stuff. And then there's who's in the room, because the attendees are as important as the speakers to me. It's not about a platform and just people on a stage. It's who are you sitting next to,
Mm-hmm.
and who are you surrounded by, and who are you having conversations with, because that's where so much of the magic happens. You might just hear one person say one thing that literally changed your whole paradigm and perspective on something that's been frustrating you, or opens your mind to what's possible.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember being, even now, it's like having people talk about really big things that they're up to. I used to be scared of those conversations, and scared meaning like it was daunting, like, wow, you're doing what? And now it's like, yeah, cool, how can I help you? So you adapt to your environments, and what feels like fiction now is nonfiction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that the power of the people in the room is it's really important. And I would also say that sometimes it's the least likely conversations that have the biggest impact.
Right.
And when you are in a room full of dreamers, you almost feel a positive pressure to dream bigger for yourself. And I
Right.
think that's a really good thing. So can we talk a little bit about risk?
Mhm.
Because like I said earlier, I've run small scale events, 400 people. I mean, I guess that's not that small, but small enough in comparison to Archangel. I mean, I'm going to guess that the last event, Archangel event that I went to, you probably had 2,500 to 3,000 people there at
Right.
least.
Yep.
And so can you talk to us a little bit about the cost, not like how much does it cost, but the risk, how you approach risk? Because when I was running my small events, I was looking, and I mean, these are pre-COVID. So my last big event was 2019. And I think I was having to write checks for the hotel for anywhere from 30 to $40,000 just for my small events. So I know that when you're
Right.
doing these bigger events, and mine are like very, very basic. We got a screen. We don't have any cool effects. We have some curtains hanging. Like it, it's there. I'm going to call it bare bones compared to what you do. How do you approach the risk of taking on the expenditure of a large scale production of an event like that and feel and know that it's going to be okay? Because so many people, when they look at doing something, they look at even a small scale event and they think, oh my gosh, it's going to cost like this much money. There's a fear that stops them because they're afraid they're not going to be able to generate enough interest in the event to even break even. So I've watched you over the years, because I've been to a number of the Archangel events and I'm coming to the next one, step them up and step them up and step them up. Where do you get the courage to do that, or the skill, and how do you mitigate risk?
Brilliant question. Okay, so yeah, they're definitely not cheap events to produce.
I
Um,
know.
the the first thing that's useful for me is that I've been doing events for a long time. So what often gets in people's way is what they don't know that they don't know about a new thing. Like getting into a new market or a new business or a new concept can be challenging because you don't um like half the risk is what you don't know. So
Mm.
I can mitigate that part and um I plan long term. Like I think when let's say for events specifically, if someone says, "Hey, I want to do my first event," they're only thinking about that one experience. I actually tell so because of what I do, people come up to me and ask me for advice on events, and they'll say, "Hey, I want to do my first event. What's your advice?" I always say, "Plan your second event," and they look at me very crooked, like, "What do you mean?" And my whole thing is, what happens after? What happens the day after your event? What happens during the event? What is the next step for people? Like, think of it more as taking an audience on a journey versus a one-time destination, and um, think more about the relationship you're creating with people versus something transactional. If it's only transactional, it you have to put way more energy into what happens next versus being relationship based where you're taking people on a journey. Like you just mentioned, you've come to multiple of my experiences. It's because I don't think about it as a transaction. Like I bet you've been to events, and I know anyone listening or watching has had this experience where you go to the event and then it's not very valuable with what you're hearing. And then there's a giant pitch or they're trying to sell you a whole bunch of stuff. And then you leave feeling like, oh man, I need a shower. Because that's the transactional type of experience where it's like, I'm never going back to that thing again. So they're trying to, for lack of a better phrase, milk you for all you're worth while you're in the room.
Yeah,
And
we
I do,
paid to get sold to.
yeah. So I know that that existed. So I went in thinking I'm going to do the exact opposite. I'm going to make the experience itself so epic that people just can't wait to come back. Um, and I think from a business paradigm, it is so much easier to continue working with the same clients than to constantly try to find new clients.
Mhm.
Right.
I
So that's
agree.
another risk mitigation. It's like make it so awesome that people want to spread the word about you. The other thing is I don't advertise, which people usually blows their mind. Like I haven't done, I don't think we've done like Facebook ads or any kind of paid advertising for any of these events, and with 3,000 people in the room. And my running joke is, I have more people who've paid us than who follow me. Like I don't have a big
Hmm.
audience or platform online because of everything I focus on with respect to building relationship and strategic partnerships um, with friends, with speakers, with people like you, right? So and then again making sure that if so you'll have your guests and friends and clients coming to my event. I make
Hmm.
sure that they have an amazing experience because that makes you look good. And then
Hmm.
you and I deepen our relationship. So
Hmm.
that's my whole life. And I think that's like my definition of marketing is what happens after someone pays you. Whereas most people define marketing as the things that you do to get people to pay you. I think it's backwards.
Mm.
What if we focus on um, outstanding experience or delivery of your thing, then you don't necessarily have to advertise as much. So those are a bunch of risk mitigations. And then yeah, like focusing on getting people to come back makes the risk go way down.
Yeah, but you don't even do that in a hard sell kind of way.
No.
I remember the very, very first Archangel event that I went to. I I think that it was kind of like it almost felt like an oversight. Oh, by the way, if you want to come back next year, here's a little special offer. And it was the only pitch of the day.
Yeah.
There were no pitches from the stage. There were no hard sells. It was, that is what attracted me to the event because I've been on those stages. I've been at the speak to sell events. I've been the speak to sell speaker.
Right.
I remember I spoke at this one event the first time I ever spoke to sell. I gave so much value, so much value. And then at the end, I was like, oh, by the way, if you want to work with me, I have this program. And I literally sold $30,000 in business. And I was like, do you know what I did? Giovanni, do you know what I did? I walked into that room and I was so dumb in that moment. I walked into that room and I went, oh, I need to learn how to speak to sell. When I went into that room, I went in to speak to give.
Right.
I went in to speak to give. I went in to teach, to impart knowledge, to give everything I had. And then at the end, it was like, oh, by the way, and that is what actually turned into business for me. And every time I have tried to speak to sell since, I don't even do it anymore. But after that, when I tried to get better at it, I'm sure you can imagine what happened. I got worse and worse and worse because now the energy of how I like to show up as a speaker is changing. I'm not showing up to just give and share what I know. I'm showing up to try to get something. And I made a decision back in 2014 that I would never do that again. That was not the way that I wanted to run business. And I think that's part of why I resonated so much with your event is because it was the opposite of what I was used to seeing people do.
Thank you.
All right, another question for you. A number of years ago, when I was at one of the first Archangel events, you asked people to share with you names of more female speakers. And I remember going up to you and sitting down next to you. I think that's what I said to you. Do you mind if I bring 10 people to your event next year? And I said, the woman you need to look into is Lisa Nichols. I don't think you knew who Lisa Nichols was at that point in time. And, I have noticed that you are very intentional about having a good split in terms of men versus women on your stage. I've also noticed that at some of the events, I've seen pictures of some of your smaller events, there tends to be more men than women. And so I'm curious, what do you think we need to do in this world to get more women to show up at the table so that they're looking at these opportunities to invest in themselves and to network and mastermind with other people as something that is vitally important for their growth and success?
Well, first, um, even for our current experiences, it's 50-50 across the board, even with the smaller events, like whether it's on stage or in the room. It, I've done this because I've like prior to me launching Archangel, any event I attended where there was a high ticket price, it was predominantly men in the audience and on stage. Actually, worse on stage. It was usually like all men or maybe one token female.
I was just going to say that
Right.
there's either a token person of color or a token
Yeah.
female on the stage.
And
It's
it was like, that's not,
it's gross.
it was, the energy was weird. And then it was just weird. So I thought, no, what works for me is balance. And balance and diversity before people use the word diversity. It was like, this is 2014. And it felt right. And we just built the community from scratch that way. And even with respect to diversity of industry, so it's not all one homogenous group of people from the same thing. like a bunch of coaches or a bunch of
Right.
health practitioners or a bunch of SaaS founders or whatever it is. It's very diverse. And actually, my inspiration for this is growing up in Toronto. So um, my background, like my parents are from Italy. They moved here when they were young. I was born here, but I grew up where I had friends from every possible country. And it's such a cool and unique experience.
Mhm.
Um, Having respect for other people's cultures, having that diversity. Whereas when I travel to a lot of other cities in North America, it's different. It's not the same. So I wanted that feeling of different voices in our community, in a global community, and it works. And like people have commented on this, and I think it's just natural and easy for us now because we have the people in our community. I think for other events, and just to answer your second question, um, like I see my responsibility as being a talent scout to looking for the awesome voices, especially those who aren't as represented. Um, for example, like when we do our big events, I always look for like there's some speakers that are well known in the speaking world or thought leadership or author world. And then I always have people who aren't because I want to give them a platform because they're freaking awesome.
Mhm.
And the majority of the time, when I ask people who was your favorite speaker, it was the one that people haven't heard of before, which makes me so happy.
Mhm.
um, so that's how I do it. I think um, people need to give more people these stages and platforms and opportunities. But I also think you mentioned women specifically. Um,
I'm more interested in how do we get more women to show up? Because what I tend to see is I tend to see, at least I, as a woman, I walk into a lot of rooms and I'm the minority.
yeah,
Like, I mean, strategic coach is a perfect example. It's 90% men.
yeah.
And I don't get me wrong, I'm comfortable in a room with a bunch of guys too, but it just makes me wonder, like, how do we get women into the habit of being okay investing in themselves and going to these types of events too?
I think, well, there's two sides of this. Like, there's people like me and you who invite them. Uh, there's also a courage curve. Like,
Hmm.
I think it's if you're not in the environment, there's limitations that people put on themselves or that other people have put on them that they have to fight through. And I think it's even more challenging for women because there's a lot more of those kinds of imposed limitations. So
Hmm.
there's an education curve and a courage curve to make these bigger decisions. Um, they need to be supported as well. So it's like I hope anyone who's feeling that comes to one of our events because
Hmm.
it's there's a safety level of coming where you feel accepted, you feel like you get to be yourself when we do what we do, and then it's like a nice stepping stone to trying this out in different places where it's a little more scarier.
Hmm. It's one of the reasons that I run the event that I run at your event. Like,
Mm.
I usually bring a group of at least 10 people to your event, and then I spend a day unpacking the event after with them. And part of the reason I do that is because there are some people that just don't feel comfortable going to a big event by themselves.
Right.
And so, I host a cocktail reception the night before the event. So everybody gets to meet each other. It's a small, intimate gathering. And I feel like things like that are kind of my way of making it easier for people who might not be comfortable going to an event with, 3,000 of their non-closest friends, feel more comfortable going. And then they actually meet more people while they're
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So.
I love that you do that.
All right. I have one more question for you. And that is, what is your biggest piece of advice to people who are listening to this podcast? And we have men and women that listen to this podcast. Most of them are entrepreneurs who want to make an impact. So you have a mission to impact millions. Maybe our listeners have a mission to impact a handful, hundreds, thousands. What is the biggest advice you can give people listening who want to make an impact too?
change yourself, change the world. Meaning, start with your inner world first. Anyone who uses the phrase change the world, I love
Mhm.
you and I get it. And change your inner world first so that you become the leader and you lead by example. And so our experiences are designed to help facilitate that inner transformation for people who want to make the outer transformation. Like, I think we all hold ourselves back. We all keep quiet. We hide. We don't express. We don't raise our voices in the right, in a way that impacts other people in the way we want. And we could all use a little more um, confidence boosts in all of these things, but we all also need frameworks of how to do it. And I'm filling in rooms with people who are doing it so that they can lead by example for the people who want to. And then when we all do it together, there's this synergistic energy of holy crap, like millions of people are being impacted by all of us. You can't
Mhm.
do it alone, but we do it together.
So when you say, impact yourself first, like work on the inside game, what specifically are some of the things that you've seen in terms of the relationships that you've had with people over the years? You've built tons of relationships. That's who you are. You're a relationship guy. What are the common patterns, maybe two or three, that you see that people need to do the most inner work on?
There is a fear of what will people think of me, meaning, um, so I think some people have clarity of what they want to do, some people don't. So first is the clarity step of what is the big dream, what is the impact, and who do I become, who am I becoming, what is the new identity. And then there's a fear around that transformation because identity shifting feels like death. You're almost grieving the old version of yourself. So there's that transformation that happens that people need support with. Then there's the what will people think of me as the new identity, because there's a comfort zone. You're comfortable in your crap, whether people realize this happens or not. And we all have an inner thermostat that blocks us from growing outside of our comfort zone. And everyone, or not everyone, but most people, I think, know the feeling of self sabotage. It's like things are finally going good, and then I do something or don't do something that isn't in alignment with getting to my next level. And we're like, why am I doing this? Why did I say that? Why didn't I say that? Why didn't I take action? And it's because we feel safe in our current identity. So I think um, getting to the next level often requires support or requires being around other people who are there already. And there's the health component. Um, it's all sort of intermixed. Like, I think personal development and business development are the same path,
Mhm.
and your business will only grow as much as you do. So to get your business to its next level, you have to get to your next level. And there's an increase in personal responsibility and confidence, in skill acquisition, in relationships. All of these things grow the inner you so that you can make the bigger outer impact.
I love that. I love that. I especially love the uh, worrying about what other people think. We go from worrying that people won't think we're enough to worrying that people think we're too much.
Right.
And I can see where that, who do you think you are kind of thing coming into play. I hosted an event. I'm going to end with a quick story that you probably don't know. I hosted an event in Ottawa years ago called Oprah in Ottawa. And was when Oprah was doing her big stage tours and she decided to come to Ottawa. My colleague and friend Samantha Munsami and I decided that we were going to host an event. And so we were calling it Oprah in Ottawa. And then I got this email from somebody. And this email basically said to me, Lisa, what do you think you're doing? People look up to you. You can't use Oprah's name in your marketing. You can't be doing this. You have a responsibility to lead by example. And it was just like this great big long email telling me basically, you know, cut the poppy down. You stay your
Right.
own size. You shouldn't be doing this. And so the first time I read it, I was like, what is this? And then I read it again and I had the biggest smile on my face. And I looked at my husband and I said, you know, you're doing something right when somebody goes to these lengths to tell you why you shouldn't be doing it. And I took that opportunity and I went to Samantha and I said, here's what we need to do. We need to get Oprah's blessing. The next thing you know, we're on the phone with her director of guest experiences, telling her about the big celebration we're planning in the city for Oprah's arrival. We're getting her legal counsel is going through our website and telling us exactly what we need to change so we are legally compliant. We're hosting the event at the hotel she's staying at because
Right.
I knew where she was staying. I was able to figure that out pretty fast. And, you know, to make a long story short, we were all over the media in Ottawa. And, you know, my next call was with, you know, somebody who wanted to interview me from the Citizen. I was like, oh, yeah, we just got off the phone with Oprah's people. And so it turned into this amazing thing. But that moment of somebody tapping me on the shoulder to basically say, who do you think you are doing this, could have went one of two ways. I could have went, oh my God, you're right. I shouldn't be
Right.
doing this. We have to stop. This is a bad idea. Or you can step into, you know, who it is you are becoming and you want to be. And I love that you said that because there is that dichotomy of, you know, not feeling worthy enough. And then when you finally do, and you're stepping into something else, somebody trying to like pull you back and put you in your place, and you have to decide, am I going to stay there or am I going to move forward? And I think that's just a really powerful thing to leave our listeners with today. So thank you for that.
You're so welcome.
That was great. All right. Giovanni, thank you so much. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for the great events that you put on. And thank you for sharing your wisdom. I think, you know you know a lot of people. I think you should get somebody to connect you to somebody at masterclass, and you should put together a masterclass on how to run great events. I think a lot of people will get a lot of value out of that.
You're the best. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. And if you would like to go to an Archangel event, hit me up. I happen to know there's one coming up in September, and I'm going to be there. My first trip back to Canada since 2021, and it is for Giovanni's event. So, you know, it's a good event if I'm coming home for that. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.